Today's guest, Sangeeta Mulchandani, the founder of Jumpstart Studios, is busy empowering thousands to embrace innovation and startup thinking. After a 15-year corporate career, she shifted to mentoring startups, sharing her expertise as an award-winning author and a university lecturer. Her mission is to inspire 1 million founders accelerate their growth worldwide.
I'm a third generation entrepreneur, so my parents were entrepreneurs, my grandparents were entrepreneurs, and I've pretty much grown up learning entrepreneurship at the dinner table. Jumpstart Studio is my sixth business. I had a lot of startups that also died along the way. Business is a journey, learning about business is a journey, and you don't sort of get to a point of success until you've tried and tried and tried. For some people, you read these overnight successes in newspapers and things like that, but you don't see the hard work that has gone behind it. You don't see the failed startups that have gone behind that founder's experience to build the successful startup. I had the corporate experience. I had built a couple of my own startups. So I sort of knew about the corporates, I knew about the startups, and I sort of could piece the patterns together to bridge that gap. How do you take an idea, bring it to startup stage, and then also take it, and how do you apply concepts from corporate to startups? How do you apply startup concepts to the corporate world? And Jumpstart Studio was always going to be a partnership model. So it becomes like this place where someone comes and say, hey, Sangeeta, I have an idea. And then I go, okay, right, let's teach you how to do it the right way, failing fast, rather than, taking time to fail. So if you have to fail, then let's fail the idea faster and then come to the successful idea faster. But also there's a bit of education. That's what we do at Jumpstart Studio. We design and deliver startup programs and innovation programs for governments, universities, and corporates. So when people ask me, what do? I say I teach startups how to start up.
I know you've got Press Play Ventures, which focuses on women founders. Yeah. And we do find very few women founders in the overall startup ecosystem. What's your view on that, and why did you choose to specifically focus on women founders? What can Australia do better or needs to do better for startups? You and I were recently part of CES, which is literally one large gathering of all the technology and innovation which is happening across the world. But we did find something missing. Why don't you share that?
Just to add more flavor to your piece, we took an Australian delegation from here to Las Vegas, where CES happens every year. So we were a delegation of 25 people, and it was very evident that Australia was missing on the map as an innovation player at that stage. And so we couldn't see a lot of Australian innovation being showcased at CES. And I think everyone in our delegation felt that, this can't be.
Welcome to Season 2 of Cask Convos and our new home, the Urban Alley Brewery, right at the heart of Melbourne, District Docklands. Born from a love of great beer and a mission to bring world-class brews to Melbourne's doorstep, Urban Alley has been crafting award-winning beers that bridge the gap between mainstream and craft, blending tradition with innovation. With a state-of-the-art 25-hectoliter brew house and a 690-person brew pub, this is where bold flavors and even bolder conversations come to life. But great ideas don't just happen over a pint. They need the right space to grow. That's why we are teaming up with Natural Velocity, a co-working hub built for innovators and game changers. Because whether it's in business or at the bar, the best ideas happen when the right people come together. So pull up a chair and let's dive in. Welcome, Sangeeta, to Cask Convos. We are very excited to have you on board.
Thank you, Sharvani.
And it's been a very exciting journey for you so far, from corporate Australia and now to nurturing startups. Yeah. Tell us a bit about what prompted this journey.
Oh, long question and longer answer. But okay, so for me, I think my journey with business, so I was born and raised in India. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. So my parents were entrepreneurs, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. And I've pretty much grown up learning entrepreneurship at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. So, it's everyday conversations were about customers, about pricing, about, how the business is working, profits, losses, things like that. So I pretty much learned entrepreneurship for the first, 20 years of my life-ish from my parents. And then as I studied and graduated, I was sort of the first person in my family to go get a job in my immediate family. And so that's where my corporate career started. And very interestingly, it actually started in Africa. in Lufthansa Airlines in Africa. So I started at a HR position, graduated to an assistant finance controller position, and then from there moved to Australia to do my master's degree. So I did my master's in accounting here, and then started working here for Ernst & Young, and then moved to ANZ bank. And so pretty much my career trajectory for about 15 years was in large corporates, global corporates, moving across different sort of domains, different industry specializations. And my last role at ANZ Bank was the director in institutional banking and head of commercialization. So that's really where my corporate career sort of finished. But there was a bit of an overlap between my corporate career and my startup journey, because during that sort of the phase, I think it was about end of 2016, early 2017, I was starting to get a bit of an itch. I was like, I'm sure there's something more I can do with my life. I can be more productive. I have more potential than just, sitting at a desk job. And well, don't get me wrong, like the skills I got in corporate were fabulous. I was just starting to get a bit antsy. And so I was just not happy doing what I was doing. So the first thing I did was I actually went traveling around the world for a year because I went soul searching. I just really wanted to figure out what my purpose is in life. And I think we all sort of come to that at some point in our lives, wondering what our purpose is.
What's your ikigai?
Yeah, and travel is like my favorite thing to do. Food and travel are my favorite things to do. So I went traveling the world. I spent a whole year traveling across Europe, America, South America, North America, a little bit of Africa, working and traveling and sort of, meeting different people, learning different cultures, and just sort of looking for who am I, like just figuring out who I am, because a lot of my identity was tied with my corporate work. And so when I came back from that travel, and luckily I still had my job, like I could take my job while I was traveling. And then I came back from my travels, and then it still wouldn't go. I was still unhappy. I was, I thought, okay, maybe it's Melbourne. So I went traveling. I came back. Melbourne was fine, but my work was still not making me happy. And so I was like, okay, so maybe it is work, and I need to do something about it. And so in 2019, I decided to take a career break. And go learn entrepreneurship, because although I come from an entrepreneurial family, for me, it was really the journey to becoming an entrepreneur in Australia, because I didn't know how to be an entrepreneur in Australia. I knew how to be an entrepreneur in India because I'd seen that. But, I was so lost here. I was like, where do I even begin? So I took the safe route, and I did a master's in entrepreneurship at the University of Melbourne, which was, and the promise of that degree was that you'll have a startup by the end of the course. And so the toss-up was between an executive MBA or doing this. And then I was like, I'm going to go do this. So I took a career break, went and did my master's in entrepreneurship, built a couple of startups during that time, and then and then after that career break, I came back early 2020, just before COVID, came back to my corporate job. And within a week, I was like, I've outgrown this. I've made customers, I've made revenue, I've done everything. And we were still fighting for funding approvals in my corporate job. And I was just like, no, I can't do this. And so, yeah, it took me about 6 months. And because COVID hit just then, it took me about 6 months before I decided finally to say goodbye to corporate and properly resign. And then in the middle of COVID, pretty much, is where my real business journey started.
That's so interesting. And it's funny that you've mentioned that, because even for me, it was very similar, where I call it my midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Because I turned 40, not because of the age, but I think it's once you gather enough experience, you want that extra bit of challenge.
Yeah.
And all of us feel that moment once in our lives where we want to push ourselves a bit more than the safety of corporates. And I'm so glad that you are not just doing it for yourself, but you actually did it. You are now doing it for many others. And I think COVID was one of those times when a lot of startups in Australia came up. And especially in Melbourne, because everybody was under lockdown, they had time on their hand and nothing else to do. But a lot of them also quickly died a silent death. So what do you think is needed for startups? I think that's something which you are trying to bring with Jumpstart Studios and Press Play.
Yeah, so Jumpstart Studio is sort of I think it's my sixth business. I had a lot of startups that also died along the way that I built, and some are still thriving. But it's a journey. Like business is a journey. Learning about business is a journey, and you don't sort of get to a point of success until you've tried and tried and tried. Like for some people, you read these overnight successes in newspapers and things like that, but you don't see the hard work that has gone behind it. You don't see the failed startups that have gone behind that founder's experience to build the successful startup. So that's definitely the case. Like it takes a little bit of time and learning, and that learning, the more you can do it hands-on, the better. So this is what we do at Jumpstart Studio. Jumpstart Studio pretty much came about because I had a lot of people. This was back in 2021, so still during COVID. I was helping a lot of startups do pro bono through university accelerators and things like that because I had the corporate experience. I had built a couple of my own startups in 2019 through my master's degree. So I sort of knew about the corporates, I knew about the startups, and I sort of could piece the patterns together to bridge that gap. How do you take an idea, bring it to startup stage, and then also take it, and how do you apply concepts from corporate to startups? How do you apply startup concepts to the corporate world? So that started becoming quite interesting work for me to do, and working with startups. So I used to do a lot of pro bono mentoring, pro bono coaching with startups. And I had a lot of people from corporates, and to your point about, a lot of people had time during COVID to think about what is it that they want to do, or they want to kick up a startup, they have an idea. I had a lot of people come to me asking me, how did you do it? How did you make the transition from employment to entrepreneurship? And so the premise of Jumpstart Studio started there is like, they felt like there was a gap in the market where, yes, there's a lot of programs that help startups, but I think the gap was that when someone has been in employment for so long, how do you make that jump? How do you make the transition? And that is a whole other game to play.
It's that transitioning from your fear into courage.
Yeah, but also there's so many other things to take into consideration, right? Like you've got people have mortgages, people have kids, people have commitments. There's so many other things to take into consideration, which may not be for if you're just out of uni. It might be a very different scenario for you. And so this is where Jumpstart Studio came in, and Jumpstart Studio was always going to be a partnership model, is still a partnership model, is always going to be a partnership model where we work with. So it becomes like this place where someone comes and say, hey, Sangeeta, I have an idea. And then I go, okay, right, let's teach you how to do it the right way. So you're actually not, you're failing fast rather than, taking time to fail. So if you have to fail, then let's fail the idea faster and then come to the successful idea faster. But also there's a bit of education. That's what we do at Jumpstart Studio. We design and deliver startup programs and innovation programs for governments, universities, and corporates. So when people ask me, what do? I say I teach startups how to start up, because that's literally what we do in Jumpstart Studio. We teach. And then this comes from my study at Uni Melbourne, my corporate life, all of that put together. And then what we do is we have ecosystem partners. So we have about 30 plus partners that we work with, where we can plug startups into all the kinds of experts they need: sales, marketing, accounting. Every business needs that, right? And so legal. So like we pretty much bring it all together for the startups, and we say, because we know it's hard to figure out where to go, or who do I look for? How do I find the right people to support me on the journey? So that's the other piece that we do a lot, is besides the education, is then the ecosystem connections, the partnerships, and getting people moving through the support of other people. And there is a lot of support out there. It's just people don't know how and where to find it. It's not organized. It's very unorganized.
100% agree. I think being a startup myself, I've realized some of the best work comes through the right collaborations, finding the right partners, and having those complementing skill sets so that your value proposition becomes stronger. So that's, I think, very valuable for a startup. I'm really keen to understand. I know you've got Press Play Ventures, which focuses on women founders. And we do find very few women founders in this in the overall startup ecosystem. What's your view on that, and why did you choose to specifically focus on women founders?
Yeah, so as Jumpstart Studio was growing, like I said, what we do now, or when we started, it was actually just helping founders one-on-one, coaching founders one-on-one. But soon it started becoming very apparent to me that we can't do that at scale if I was doing one-on-one. So a lot of the work that we started doing then was working with universities, with governments, with corporates to run programs. And so because programs then create a different environment as well, it creates a lot of that sense of belonging, a bit of community for the startups and the founders, and they feel like, okay, you know, there's other people in the trenches with me rather than just this one mentor that one mentor that I'm talking to. So that's really where the programming piece came. And so because I was doing programming for others, there was an opportunity that was put out by Launchwick, which is the startup agency, the government startup agency for Victoria. And they sort of put out a grant saying we want more women's pre-accelerator programs. And I was running pre-accelerators already. So for me, that was like the best opportunity. It was like, I'm a woman, I understand what it takes to transition from employment to entrepreneurship. And I had to go find a team of people that had similar views, similar sort of drivers, and sort of could see the vision and, you know, sort of play with the vision alongside me. And so that's how I found my team of the 3 people that we have with me at the moment. So we have 4 of us that run Press Play Ventures. And we launched Press Play Ventures as a program that sits under Jumpstart Studio. So the promise we made back to Launchwick was that for the grant that we received, which was $300,000, we will help 100 women transition from employment to entrepreneurship in Victoria.
How many women is it now?
It's been massive. The demand has been massive. So that 100 women was supposed to happen over 2 years, 2024 and 2025. And we are in the beginning of 2025, and we've already, we're at 120 founders now in our program already.
That's great.
And we've had to reject half the applications we've gotten as well. So there is an application process and everything, but, you know, there's only that much that we can do. But to your point about, you know, why aren't there enough women? I feel like women need more than just another program. And especially women in employment, right? So I think for women in employment, there's, to my point before, where they think about a lot of things. There's like the family commitments, the kids, the, you know, mortgages, the parents. So as a woman, you're not just a woman. Like, you don't put yourself first. You are first a mother, you're first a wife, you're first a daughter, you're first a sister. Like, these roles are very important to women. So women often don't put themselves first. Whereas for men, it's quite different. They can put themselves first. And because I do other programs that are mixed gendered and things like that as well, so I can see these stark differences when we run our women's only program and when we run sort of a mixed program. It's a very different vibe. And women need to find their tribe. Like, they want to find other women who are in similar sort of age groups, doing similar things. That boosts their confidence. That gives them a bit of okay, I'm not alone here. I'm not the weird one. Like, you know, there's other people like me out there who are trying to do this, and I feel more supported through them. So for us, it was quite a clear value proposition that we had. And also because the 4 of us that are on the Press Play Ventures team, we each are corporate dropouts, right? So we each have left corporate jobs to start our own businesses. All 4 of us have our own businesses. And then we've all come together to do this program, the Press Play Ventures program, helping women. And we're 3 women out of the 4 team members. 3 are women and 1 is Isaac, who I call my diversity hire. Because all the 3 of us are Indian women. And he's our white guy representation. But really, like, that's our team. We're super fun team to work with. I really enjoy working with them. And I think what I really appreciate is they get the women factor. And I think one of the biggest factors or biggest differentiators is how much we care. Like, the care factor that we have around our founders, I can tell you, like, it's been rated the highest amongst many other programs. And for women, that is important. It more than the, you know, the logical stuff, it is the nurturing environment that you can provide, and women sort of need that.
I was going to say that women, by almost biologically or even from an evolution perspective, we are nurturers.
Yes.
And we thrive in nurturing environments. I've seen that men are, I wouldn't say not afraid, but rather men are very happy to be lone rangers in a lot of spaces. Whereas women enjoy that tribe. They enjoy bouncing off ideas. It's a very natural thing that comes to us. So I can understand that need to do that, definitely. But what do you think, looking at Jumpstart Studios and looking at Press Play Ventures, what do you think are overall challenges that startups face? Like, what can Australia do better or needs to do better for startups?
Australia needs to do a lot for startups. And I say this all the time. I say this to the government as well. I'm like, I'm very open about this. I feel like Australia is a great place to test ideas, to sort of, have this idea. Let's say you have an idea. Australia is a fantastic place to get government support. And especially Victoria, like Melbourne and Victoria, we probably are one of the best states in the whole country that has government grants that go towards startups. We have accelerator programs that are very supporting, right from with the journey of a startup. Usually, you have an idea, you would go to a pre-accelerator, do a pre-accel, then do an accelerator, and then you go into like longer sort of incubation type programs. The concentration of pre-accelerators and accelerators and the quality of them also is really good here. Okay. So the government does a lot to support startups. Having said that, though, I feel like that is not the case in every state in Australia. So there are a lot of startups, a lot of founders that don't receive. So it's not the same experience for everybody around Australia. Number one, I think that can be better. The second thing I think that can be better is that yes, startups start here, but to scale, we just don't have the population. We don't have the population. We don't have the risk appetite in this country to take chances. We know that Australia is traditionally quite risk averse. You can see this play out in corporate cultures. You see this play out in even retail cultures that you see around us. Just in the way, like, retail businesses run in Australia, the kind of, let's talk about customer service. Customer service is missing in Australia. Like, it's hard to find. You go into a restaurant that is not run by somebody who's a migrant from Asia, there's no customer service, right? You run into retail stores, and again, like, the customer service that you get in Asia, you will not find that here. So there's a very the scale at which we play. We've got a very independent culture, but the reality is we don't have the bandwidth for startups to scale in Australia. So Australia has to go out. Australian startups, once they're starting to scale, start looking at the US market, so start looking at UK as their first sort of go-to markets. The problem there is you've got a lot of competition already. Everybody's looking at these markets, right? So the other thing that Australia is not doing really well is looking at the other side of the world, this side of the map, which is Asia, India, UAE, Africa. These are brilliant markets, and these markets are opening up really quickly. The disposable income in these markets is really high, and people are hungry for Australian products. Like, Australia has a brand in the world, and that brand is not being leveraged by startups. So on a global scale, I feel like that is one of the bigger problems that Australia has. The other thing I think Australia needs to be doing is, even with the startups, they're not very risk taking because of the general culture of how Australia operates.
Why do you think that is? Like, what is it that's prompting this sort of a risk averse culture?
I think it's a couple of things. One is, like I said, we are handed a lot of things on a platter here, right? If you look at our Medicare system, if you look at our, our system, our systems that exist around government processes and things like that, everything is very smooth. It's very set up. It's very set out. So there's no hunger.
But I would challenge that, because you find the same thing in Europe as well. They've got fantastic healthcare systems. They've got fantastic support from the government as well. But we see a lot of innovation coming out of Europe. Whereas over here, and I have felt that as well, the risk-averse culture. I've talked to a lot of people who've had great ideas, who've probably gone outside as well. And if you look at some of our biggest brands, which started as startups, most of their funding also came from America instead of Australia. Yes. So what else? Where are we missing the boat?
Yeah, so, and this is what it is. I think you're right. Europe has a similar healthcare system and things like that. But you look at what Europe does, right? Europe is a fragment of small little states. There are different cultures in all these different states. And when you look at this, the overall sort of earning capability, or just, how much do people earn on an average? Like the work that they need to put into having a decent living in Europe versus the work you need to put into having a decent living in Australia is very different. And so we are a very lucky country, right? We often are called a lucky country, and we are. Like, I think I've heard a lot of complaints about the government systems and things like that, but compared to some other parts of the world, we
are privileged.
We're privileged, right? And that privilege is what plays out. So that privilege is what plays out in terms of entitlement. I'm entitled to this. So I'll give you a really small example. We're talking about Press Play Ventures. We're talking about pre-accelerator programs. It's very hard to get startup founders here to pay to go to a pre-accelerator, or to invest in their own education. That's what you're asking them to do, invest in your own education, right? But it's so hard. Why? Because they feel like, oh, this should be given to me for free. Why should I have to pay for this, right? Well, didn't you have to pay for your degree? Didn't you have to pay for your schooling to get to your job? So why do you think you can just jump into business and not have to do some education to actually run your business? You need to do education to get a job. You need education to run a business. But if you're not willing to invest in that, and you feel like it should be given for free, because look at our public school systems, right? It's very affordable and easy, and for people to go through that without a lot of money. So they feel like the same thing needs to be afforded here, but business is a very different game. So this is what sort of plays out in the mentality of how it's grown. But we launched a program last year in India, which was the Overseas Accelerator Program, and I monetized it straight away. And startups were willing to pay. The hunger to learn and the willingness, money is just a exchange of value, right? So for me, it's not so much about how much money are we making from the programs. It's about, do you value it enough to put something on the table and then stay committed to the education? You will see here most pre-accelerator programs or accelerator programs are provided for free, because it's very hard to get people here to put some value towards these things, because there is the sense of entitlement.
So how do we change that? I think I'm really curious to know.
Yeah.
How can we encourage people not to spend money, but it's literally investing in their own startup? Like, they need to be the first investor in their startup.
Yes.
How do we change that?
I think I think we find is a lot of people, due to that risk-averse sort of mentality, and also because I think the way society has been built in Australia is the banks keep you locked in with your mortgage, right? Everyone, the aspiration is, or the Australian dream is, to have a house, and you basically take a mortgage to get that house, and then you're working your 9-to-5 jobs to make sure the money is coming in consistently every month to pay your mortgages every month. So the system has been built around jobs. The system hasn't been built for businesses.
That capacity to fail.
Yes.
Giving people that failure KPI. Like, this is something which I used to talk when I was in corporate a lot. Developing any idea needs to have that failure KPI so that people can pivot. They can feel safe to pivot. Yes, there is a loss, but that loss can be minimized by giving that safe space to pivot, change ideas, and just take a risk, essentially. So you're very right.
But also in corporates, like in corporate Australia, when I was working in the corporates, there was talk about, well, we'd love to see more failure stories and, share your failures and things like that. The reality is different on the ground, though. Like, there's one is the talk and one is the reality, right? So while from the top down, there might be a good understanding of, yes, we need to have a bit of failure culture and things like that, and learning from failure and dealing with failure and better. I think on the ground, the way it works out is then to your point, KPIs don't reflect that. If you actually fail, then you're penalized, you're demoted, you're looked down upon. Like, the culture doesn't absorb failure very easily. So while the intent may be there, I feel like the behaviors don't play out the same way. And so that definitely also plays out where people are very risk averse in wanting to start something new, to go away from the known, because life in Australia is good. Like, for majority of people, and especially people like you and me, who are even migrants who've come from outside, we've done well for ourselves. We've set ourselves up here. We've done well for ourselves. What is the incentive to take a risk? What is the incentive to do something different? Where is the hunger, right? If you look at other countries, and I'm going to compare this again with the Asian countries, because you can see the hunger; it's visible. Whether that's Singapore, whether that's Dubai, whether that's the our subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, right from India to Nepal to Sri Lanka, like any of these countries, pick them, and China as well. Like pick any of these countries, there is a hunger. They want to succeed. People there want to succeed. Whereas in Australia, you're a success automatically, in a sense.
I think I've seen that right from the schooling system in these countries to corporate spaces. You can see that hunger, and it's literally groomed into the people, which is I think something which we need to be thankful about coming from that background, and I feel that's definitely needed. You're right. And this thought was occurring to me just a few days ago. I was made aware, um, thinking about your example, that the Indian government actually incentivizes, not rather incentivizes, but they have a directive for corporates above a threshold of revenue to direct 2% of their profits for CSR initiatives. And a lot of them pump this revenue into R&D, whether it's with universities or whether it's with their own R&D initiatives, but essentially R&D initiatives which are beneficial for the overall environment, beneficial for the community. And I think that is also a very small, quick win in a way, that a lot of from a policy perspective also can be done. And I believe that you are also trying to contribute in the policy space. We would love to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia at the moment, there is an R&D policy review that's on, and like the what we have in the report is that about 1.6% of GDP, if I'm not mistaken, is what is our R&D kind of output. Yeah, the output and R&D output. And in other countries, it's about 3.6% or more, like countries like Japan. And so specifically in those sort of scenarios, the government is really rethinking about its R&D policies, and how does R&D actually occur. And if you read the report, which I believe is publicly available as well, where you will find that a lot of the R&D that happens is happening in universities. It is happening with specific organizations that are R&D focused, like CSIRO, organizations like that. So a lot of the work coming out of these research labs is, one, it's great research, 100%, like great research coming out of there. But the commercialization of that research is the challenge. How do you realize output from it? How do you realize commercial value from it? And this commercial value has to be for the whole nation, right? So it's not just something that happens for an organization. Whereas in some of the other countries like Japan, the example I was giving you before, is we've got a lot of corporate organizations that are invested in the research and commercialization of research and development. So because they're by nature, they're corporate entities, their R&D is focused with a commercialization lens already. Whereas with us, because it's coming from universities and research organizations, the commercialization aspect is starting to pick up, but it's not there yet.
It's almost like an afterthought, I would say.
Correct, and it's not there yet. And one of the things that I have a strong belief around is research and development and entrepreneurship are two separate things, but they can be bridged. Although what I do not agree a lot with is converting researchers into entrepreneurs. Researchers are great at what they do, and entrepreneurs are great at what they do. They have a different mindset, skill set, risk appetite, different mindset, skill set, and risk appetite. And we have to find a way to bridge the two to be able to commercialize research and development. So that is one thing. And the other thing we need is a lot of corporate play in Australia coming in with R&D. Because R&D is not just about, you go into a lab and sit there for hours and research something and it's done. It's more about saying, right, so how do we make it better? Even our current sort of systems and processes and things like that, research and development can go into that level as well. A lot of R&D that you see happening in other countries comes out of manufacturing industries. Whereas if you look at us, our biggest industry is agri. There's a lot of R&D that can happen in agri, that must happen in agri, but they still happen in labs. And then how do they get commercialized, right? There is commercialization, but it's slow because Australia is a huge country and our farms are spread far and wide. How do you actually get that going?
It's a different challenge
It's
altogether.
a very different challenge. And then you've got large corporates that play in the agri space, that are not coming to the party to commercialize this. So again, this is where I'm thinking, like, and you pick any industry, corporates have to play a role in commercializing the output because they're the ones that know about business, right? They're the business entities. How do you connect the business entities and our innovation ecosystems, whether that's R&D, whether that's startups? Like even startups are innovation ecosystems essentially, right? So they're doing R&D, but at a different kind of R&D.
That is such an important point because when you look at commercialization, that is not even taught at a ground level.
Yes.
And that's such an important aspect of any idea conceptualization. I believe before anything, we need to think how to commercialize that idea or what is the return of investment of an idea. Because unless we do that, it will never take off. And that is one thing which we need to address. Because unless there is a return of investment, there's no longevity, there's no sustainability of that idea. So it is literally a basic skill that we need to teach. In fact, I would say that is something which we need to teach right from school level. And I've seen few very different schools over here take that on, teaching the students how to, the commercial aspects of thing. And that's such a good thing, which I feel needs to be taught in schools, universities, corporates, everywhere, wherever there is innovation. But I want to pick on that thing you mentioned around coming to the party. You and I were recently part of CES, which is literally one large gathering of all the technology and innovation which is happening across the world. And it was such an eye-opener to see the kind of work which is happening across the world in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, everything from mining to agriculture to healthcare. But we did find something missing. Why don't you share that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to add more flavor to your piece, but yeah, we went on a delegation. We took an Australian delegation from here to Las Vegas, where CES happens every year. And I think it was very evident. So we were a delegation of 25 people, and it was very evident that Australia was missing on the map as a player at that stage, as an innovation player at that stage. And so we couldn't see a lot of Australian innovation being showcased at CES. And I think everyone in our delegation felt that, this can't be the case. Like we should have some sort of representation here. And we were lucky, we had a fair few startups in the mix as well who could sort of at the last minute find a bit of a spot and say, okay, I'm going to display my technology, or I'm going to,
Hats off to them.
Hats off to them.
They were
and
true
they got
hustlers.
Absolutely, and they got some great outcomes, right? We got people who closed deals. We got people who got a lot of, expressions of interest, investment. So I feel like, just showing what a small delegation like that can also achieve out of an event like CES. Imagine if we actually had an Australia pavilion or an Australia booth there, showcasing all the different amazing technology and research and development and things that are coming out of here, whether that's from universities or from, the startup ecosystem or the corporate ecosystem. Like, I feel like everyone has their own place, but everyone can participate in an event like that, because like we saw at CES, like there was a startup floor, which we call the dungeon. And then there was the, the corporate floor where you had all these big corporate companies showcasing what's new in their technology and, what they're coming up with, what the latest is that they're putting out in the world. And yeah, Australia was sorely missing. So I feel like that's the other challenge with Australian innovation systems is we're very comfortable in our space here in Australia. We're very comfortable with the work that we're doing here. We don't chase. Again, it comes back to the hunger piece, I think, of how hungry are we to showcase on the world stage? How hungry are we to be present and visible on the world stage? And I think it's very sad to see that we don't have that kind of hunger to be seen on the world stage. But I think there are two functions to that. One is it could also be awareness. Like, are people in our ecosystems even aware about being visible at this global stage and what CES is and what can happen? And the other thing I think is also then, if they are aware, do they care? Do we have enough support from the government to put Brand Australia and Brand Innovation Australia on stage in places like this? So I think those are a few things definitely to consider um, about our innovation ecosystem as a challenge, and how do we work through that.
Exactly, and I think the missing portion is that they don't realize the impact that it can cause. I saw a startup owner over there hustling, and he had already locked in an investment of 20 million. Imagine the amount of business that he will be getting to his country because of that. So and that's a missed opportunity for startups over here, where you've got a platform, a global platform, which is attended by around 150,000 delegates, which includes lots of investors and venture capitalists as well, and they are literally crawling the floors looking for that next big idea to invest in.
Absolutely.
I saw everything from semiconductors to women's healthcare products. It was, and I felt that as Australian entrepreneurs, yes, the 25 of us were very lucky to get that opportunity, but there were so many who missed that. But also, which was quite surprising, was that on the corporate floors, corporate Australia was just not there. Whereas we've done some amazing innovations in mining and agriculture, and we did not showcase that. We did not showcase it for the world to get more investment into our country. What do you think is missing in corporate Australia in terms of innovation? They've got the money. Why aren't they investing?
I don't know. Let's ask them. I think that's a very good question to ask. And again, I think a lot of what happens here in Australia is we do get tied up with our own world. If you look at us geographically as well, we're quite separate from the rest of the world and the land masses. And so it can be very easy to just then, turn inwards and focus where we are. I wonder if that is one of the reasons. But again, I think I will defer back to I appreciate everything that the government of Australia does for the economy and what we do, but I feel like if we can start supporting through funding a little bit more of the global exposure piece for corporates, because I know that corporates probably are speaking to governments all the time and getting them to support them. But I wonder if, events like these, world events like these, are top of their agenda or not. Because again, they probably understand it's a missed opportunity, but then do they have the desire to be at that world stage, or are they happy with what they're doing in their day-to-day and actually making enough of it?
Good point. So what do you think might be certain quick wins for maybe corporate Australia? How can they boost their innovation capability?
Yeah, I think if you talk about innovation in today's day and age, especially in 2025, you can't ignore the fact about AI, right? And this is one of the things we saw at CES as well. Like, AI was the theme of the whole show, I suppose. And so the one thing I think Australia needs to do is really come to the party quickly, because the scale at which and the pace at which innovation is booming around the world. Like, if you just look back to like 10 years ago, some of the pace at which innovation was going was pretty palatable, but now it's a bit scary. Like, you just look at the pace at which people are innovating around the world, right? Is scary. Like, it's just every day you wake up and there's something new that has happened or something new that has been developed, and you're just like, okay, boom, that just came out of nowhere. Just look at the stock markets. You can see the fluctuations happening there are volatile, and that is a good reflection of how quickly things are changing, and whether that is political agendas changing, which we all know is happening a lot at the moment. But along with that, there is also innovation that is happening quite rapidly. The most recent example is if you look at ChatGPT and DeepSeek, and you can quickly compare and see, like, DeepSeek just came out of nowhere. and ChatGPT's users suddenly got, impacted the whole, and that reflected on the stock market as well. So there's a lot of these interconnected events that are happening around the world, and especially when you think of innovation, there's a lot of things rapidly evolving. Like until 2-3 years ago, I couldn't make an avatar of myself with a click of a button. Today I can, right? So it's things like these that are getting really quick and easy. And one of the things that I think Australia can do better is just wake up and really start, paying attention to the innovation happening outside of Australia, and then seeing how can we, either adopt it or bring it in here and customize it for us, or also how can we compete at that world stage, because again, that's the other thing, we don't do much in Australia's competition. We have a lot of
We don't have that culture of competition.
we don't
at all.
have the culture.
Like, it's great from a personal perspective. You are at an ease, but not having that culture of competition should actually be to your benefit, where you are at a peace to actually innovate properly, instead of just being a bystander.
Yes.
In fact, that's a interesting point you've raised, because it's an observation which I've also made, that when you look at most corporate transformation programs, they're just, generally it's like, okay, this is going to be a 3-year roadmap.
Yes.
Or 5-year roadmap,
Yes.
generally a 3-year roadmap.
Yeah.
But the problem is technology is completely changing these days.
Yes.
Within 18 months.
Yes.
So by the time we plan to roll out that roadmap and achieve that roadmap, most cases actually those roadmaps are also partially achieved at the end of 3 years. The roadmap becomes obsolete, the technology becomes obsolete.
Yes.
And that is something which we also focus on in Dot Infinity, where instead of looking at the technology or the feature set, how can we bring more about focusing on the problem that we have to solve. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
I think we've had a great conversation, but I would love to get some great ideas going as well from our audience.
Yes.
And I think you've got a bit of a giveaway over here.
Yes, I do. This is my book. It's called Start Right, How to Pick a Winning Business Idea and Make It Successful. It's an award-winning book, and you can look it up on Amazon as well to see what it entails. But essentially, it's a book to help people start off with great ideas. And when we talk about innovation, I think one of the things that we don't talk a lot about is what is successful innovation. And successful innovation has 3 components. One is mindset, strategy, and execution. And I think this is fairly simple to understand, but the how behind it is where people get lost. So this book actually has a lot of the frameworks and the structures that have come from Silicon Valley, and where innovation, we know that it's a minefield of innovation. And how can anybody really pick up an idea and apply some of these concepts really simply and easily to execute on their ideas. And so create the mindset, but also a strategy and execution plan behind it. So we've got 2 of these to give away to anyone who can tell us, how would you like to do innovation in corporate Australia? And the 2 most innovative ideas for innovation in corporate Australia will get a copy of the book for free.
So start typing.
Yes.
And I think you also have an announcement around your next cohort of Press Play.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we said, Press Play Ventures is about helping more women transition from employment to entrepreneurship. And we have our 4th cohort, which will be open for applications from April 2025 onwards until mid-May 2025. And we are looking to take in between 20 to 30 women on the program. There's an 85% scholarship available still. So we ran out of 100% scholarships, which is what we did with the Launch Week funding. But we still have 85% scholarships that are available for 20 women that go onto the program. And look us up. It's pressplay.ventures. And all you have to do is go in there, and all the details are there to apply.
Thank you so much. We will be putting these links, including the link to your book, when we make our posts. But I would say to our audience, I think this is a great opportunity to invest in yourself.
Yes, agree.
So if you've got a beautiful idea which can change the world, do invest in yourself as well as Australia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. From data management and product innovation to regulatory compliance, whether it's optimizing costs or enhancing efficiencies, Dot Infinity is your partner for solving tricky problems with a human-centric and tech-powered approach. Connect with us at contact@infinity.co.